Oftentimes my students ask me about what to do with their ends. If they have ends that all line up in one central location, as in this straight line on this rug here, some students have a concern that all those clipped ends along the edge might look a little bit awkward to them. And so I'm going to teach you today an alternative method for hiding your ends, and then talk to you a little bit more about my style of whether or not I like to have my ends clipped or not on the edges. So there's a few methods that you can use to hide your ends so that they're not right on the raw edge if you like. The first one is to pull your end up in the area where your second loop normally would be, just like this. Then you go back to the beginning of the row to pull up your first loop, and then go back to where the end was pulled up and pull a second loop, and that end gets sandwiched right between the first two loops. If you cut it down super tight, then that helps hide it a little bit, but you really can't see it very much. If you want to have it hidden even more than that, because you're afraid that maybe you might see your ends as you go along the row, then there's another way that you can hide your end. In this method, I'm actually going to pull a loop in the spot where the second loop would be. Then I'm going to go back using the short end of my wool and pull a second loop at the beginning of the row. Then I go back into the second loop, go into the center of the second loop, and pull that end right up through the middle of it. So here's my end. I can continue down the row as usual and come back and cut my end off tight. And now that loop here is hidden right in the center of this second loop, and it's not going to show. As you get to the end of your row, you might ask me, okay, so what do I do when I get to the other end? And it simply will look like this. You can come along towards the end of your rug, or the end of the row of this rug. And when you get to the very end of the row, you come back into the second loop of the row and pull that end out here. Once again, cut it off. And this is just like at the beginning of the row, where my end is now hidden at the beginning, and here is my last loop. And so now you've got loops along the edge of your rug instead of cut ends. Now, I also want to mention to you that my preference when I'm coming to the edges of particular items in my rug is I like to leave my ends. I don't think it's worth the extra effort to go and hide these ends as I demonstrated to you. You can see in this particular rug that I've got a lot of ends coming all along this row here. If I move my rug along, you can see that I've got an entire section here where all my rows have jutted up against the top. And I like that look simply because I think that it then shows a delineation for the eye that we've now come to an end and we're now moving on to something new. As opposed to a loop, which sometimes likes to bloom over into other areas, and it's not quite as succinct an edge. So once again, you can use your own method. But I hope this has been informative, learning a couple of different methods for you to experiment with in hiding your ends or leaving your ends tight against the edges.